much. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you, and really thank you for being here. The presence here today sends a message to all citizens. I will start with a quote from General Douglas MacArthur, speaking about our military. When I think of the patience under adversity, the courage under fire, the modesty in victory, I am filled with emotion and admiration I cannot put into words. They belong to history as furnishing one of the greatest examples of successful patriotism. Successful patriotism, we don't obtain successful patriotism by accident. It starts in the family, reinforced in our neighborhoods, churches, and schools. It's shown by respect on our Little League fields to respect in the boardrooms of our largest corporations. It is reflected by the conduct of our citizenry and the leadership in our military. It is the American way. From the long years of coordination and planning between our political leaders, military leaders, and allies with the intent to someday bring a force so mighty, bring a force so strong, bring a force so righteous with a righteous purchase that our fighting soldiers on D-Day could not fail. Placing the years of planning at many levels into action was an exercise in coordination of soldiers, sailors, and airmen, countless planes, gliders, ships, and other pieces of military equipment backed by thousands behind the scenes, both military and civilian, in support roles. So on D-Day, our fighting forces demonstrated what I believe is the strongest modern example of American exceptionalism. My dad, Sergeant Paul Hilovsky, was a part of D-Day. He volunteered, not because he wanted to jump out of perfectly good airplanes, but because he was paid an extra $5 a month. And then he volunteered to become a Pathfinder because, being from a very poor family, it paid an extra $50 a month. Pathfinders were America's first special forces and were born out of the near disaster during the invasion of Sicily. General Gavin realized he needed boots on the ground behind enemy lines before the action started. So he formed an elite special forces unit, paratroop unit, skilled in evasion, hand-to-hand combat, surveillance, marksmanship, and navigation. The men recruited realized they were truly the stealth tip of the spear and were counted on to lead the way, hence the name Pathfinder. My dad was one of fewer than 300 Pathfinders. They jumped first behind enemy lines totally unsupported to protect the surprise of Operation Overlord. Pathfinders were loaded with over 85 pounds of communications and navigation equipment, even though the typical fighting man like my dad weighed less than 150 pounds. Think about that. They embarked at 12:30 a.m. on 6 June, headed for France. He landed outside of St. Mary-Glise and was part of the fighting force that liberated the first city in France from German occupation, St. Mary-Glise. Although not a tall man, my dad was a tough guy with broad shoulders who could intimidate many. I witnessed him doing one-arm push-ups well into his 50s. As tough as he was, he had a big smile and a big heart. He was kind, loving. He was an awesome dad. My dad, like so many, volunteered to fight tyranny because it was the right thing to do. Our soldiers put the troubles of the world ahead of their personal fear, doing things they would have never dreamed about, seeing things they could never unsee, acting in a way outside of war no civil society would tolerate, in lands most would never, ever travel to again to save people they didn't even know. We can only imagine what our warriors were thinking in the silence of the C-47 ride across the English Channel, or the men on the Higgins boats ready to storm the beaches. They're probably praying, and that they and their buddies could go home, see their girlfriends and their families, the smell of a home-cooked meal, a quiet house, maybe even a warm bed. 80 years ago is a long time. So few who were there then could return now, and in a year or two, no one will remain. So it is up to us to preserve the memory of their bravery. We will never forget, but let us understand here and now that many will not recognize their sacrifice like we do and really care what happened. So it is up to us to carry the torch forward and light the way like the Pathfinders did, so others will understand and appreciate how they changed the world. Finally, one last quote from Ronald Reagan. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom as we have known it is to fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with well-fought lessons of how they and their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in America when men were free. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless America.